Right, so the Houthis in Yemen, they are still giving Israel a very big headache with their shipping. And despite the best efforts of the US to tackle this with their Operation Prosperity Guardians, it is costing everyone concerned an absolute fortune. Deservedly, with a simple, easy answer for the US and its allies to stop wasting cash, but to tell Israel to stop bombing Gaza. They are the one country who could stop this in a heartbeat after all. If they won't, well, more fool them in which case. But the media messaging on the shipping delays and attacks has shifted, and that in turn has seen shifts on the political stage, at least in some quarters. The phrase Iran-backed came up the other day, started to come in the other day, especially when it came up in context with these Yemenis and the Houthis and their actions against Israeli shipping. I covered all of that the other day, saying, well, Israel should be called US-backed if that's the case. Seems only fair, doesn't it, in the name of impartiality? But this narrative is carrying on, and more Iran is becoming the focus. If Israel's reputation is in tatters, if people are siding with and showing sympathy for the people of Gaza, of Palestine, and the Houthis of Yemen who have their backs, and any talk against them is no longer cutting through as once it did, then clearly a new scapegoat is needed, a new boogeyman to convince the masses, to tell the world that the real enemy is over here, not over there anymore. But it's really pathetic to drag in a nation that originally had nothing to do with any of this back on October 7th, as someone to distract from Israel and again attempt to garner sympathy for that nation, despite what they are doing. You can't say the pro-Israel lobby aren't triers, but let's not pretend Iran are the villains of all this picture either. Right, so it's a case of end the siege in Gaza, and all the shipping hold-ups by the Houthis in Yemen will end. That is what has been said from the beginning of their response to Israel, with their solidarity with Palestine, with what is happening in Gaza, and they've been treated like a joke for it, basically, haven't they? God forbid Israel be told to stop bombing indiscriminately. How dare anybody tell Israel to do anything? It no longer matters that it looks like they killed more of their own people on October 7th than Hamas did. That one night has now led to 11 weeks of attacks on the Gaza Strip. Over 70,000 Gazans injured, nearly 30,000 killed, of which more than 11,000 were children, and that number just keeps going up, doesn't it? But our shipping, they wail. Our economy, they moan. Won't anybody please think of the poor Israelis? We'll stop wasting national money on bombs and rockets and bullets and guns against a captive population you hold under occupation, whose rockets would make little more than a fun firework on November 5th, and who for the most part are armed with sticks and stones, which is a shoot-to-kill or imprisonment offence according to Israel, by the way. How dare anyone side with Palestine? Well, tough. A lot of us have. Justifiably. Not least those in Yemen, of course. But the Yemeni retaliation seems to have opened the door for a convenient scapegoat. The eternally villainous, in Western media anyway, nation of Iran, who are apparently funding those plucky Houthis with their drones and their speedboats and their parody Top Gun videos just to flip the bird to the Americans. All of a sudden, Iran has become the focus of a lot of media stories since Yemen decided to turn the bab-el-mandeb Strait, which leads to the Suez Canal in the north of the Red Sea, into a bottleneck for Israeli shipping that couldn't avoid their interference. Come this way if you dare kind of thing. But Iran, how can we pin it on Iran? How can we get people attacking Iran? Iran are funding Yemen. Yemen are popular for fighting for Palestine. Anyone accusing them of being Iran-backed is getting ridiculed because of all those countries backing Israel still, when so many people across the world are not, and governments in the West are so often out of step with their own people. Where we want the violence to end, to them it's about the blame game, shifting that narrative, getting people looking elsewhere. And Iran and the US, as my bid from the other day explained, do not like each other, have had no diplomatic ties since 1980. You can argue it is because of countries like Iran that the US is so desperate to have a foothold in the Middle East, but their foothold right now is committing genocide, and no amount of propagandizing is going to distract from that. So what have they done then, Damo? Get to the point, you might be thinking. Well, for that we have to go to India. Yep, what? Yes, India. Let's rope in another country into this mess of a media smear fest, why not? India, more specifically a chemical tanker called the Chem Pluto, which on December 23rd was apparently the subject of a drone attack in the Indian Ocean, which is well away from the Red Sea. The only source we have for who is responsible for that, however, still to this day, no matter which media outlet is covering the story, is the Pentagon, who claimed it to be a one-way suicide drone from Iran. Now, the Pluto was transporting chemicals, it's a chemical tanker, from Saudi Arabia to Mumbai in India, which would take it through the Persian Gulf and across the Arabian Sea in the north of the Indian Ocean. Nowhere near the Red Sea, which is literally the other side of Saudi Arabia. It forms the Saudi west coast. The Persian Gulf is on its east coast. So this ship was sailing away from the Red Sea, away from Yemen, away from Israel. But it had to sail past Iran. Was it Iran? Did they do this? Did they take a drone out there? Did they do it? Well, could have been. Alternatively, we only have the US's word that it was a drone attack at all that caused a small fire on that ship. Nobody was hurt, incidentally, which is the most important thing here. But according to the Pentagon, it was the 7th attack by Iran since 2021. But crucially, I've looked at a couple of media sources who have covered this particular story. I looked at Sky News and the comic known as the Daily Express. So one TV media outlet on its website and one right-wing rag, for context, just so you know what I have looked at. But both have made a note of saying that this drone attack is the first such attack away from the Red Sea since the October 7th attack. So clearly we have the media somewhere in collusion. Should we go there? We'll say that. In collusion, looking to link this incident to what is happening in Israel and Gaza, even though this ship was sailing away from that area. Now, aside from a claim that the vessel was Israel affiliated, even though it wasn't bound for Israel at all at that time, nor going anywhere near the Red Sea, as I just said, it was literally heading in the other direction, they have nothing. Even the Daily Express put Iranian drone in inverted commas in their headline because there is no proof. Iran's response to this? Well, they've claimed the US accusations are baseless, and they can quite easily do that because where is the evidence? Show it to us, Pentagon. The Eye newspaper is now reporting that India are going to put military vessels in the Arabian Sea now. It's a hilarious article they put out, by the way. It's barely even an article, quite frankly. It consists of a few lines of accusation that Iran is responsible, Iran saying nonsense, and then the remainder of the article, about half of it, talking about the Houthis in Yemen using drone and rocket attacks as if that somehow is related to the attack on the tanker that was literally sailing away from the direction of Yemen and the Red Sea and Israel and Palestine when it was allegedly attacked. An article, supposedly an update on India's reaction to the Pluto, ended up more about Iran-backed Yemen than the ship. And Yemen has nothing to do with this incident in any way, shape or form. It isn't just the media embarrassing themselves trying to draw what seems to be a very weak link and a blatant distraction from Israel towards an Iran-bashing contest. Following the initial reports of the attack on the Pluto, David Cameron, all of a sudden, immediately found time to respond to these reports, who has said Iran needs to cease its malign activities and that they wouldn't be tolerated in the Middle East or here in the UK. Well, what's it got to do with us, frankly? We're nowhere near it. Stop pontificating, you fool. Again, there's no proof other than what the Pentagon has said. The US are not impartial here. We know that. There's been no independent verification. But don't let that stop the ham-faced, unelected Foreign Secretary David Cameron. He then made the link. He said that Hamas, the Houthis and Hezbollah, let's get them all in. We're all proxies for the Tehran regime. And we're fueling an extremely high level of danger and insecurity around the world. No, they aren't, Dave. The Houthis of Yemen only came into the picture when they declared they decided to support Palestine proactively by interfering with Israeli shipping. They haven't touched anyone else's ships, just those that are destined for, or leaving from, or owned by Israel. Hamas, whatever you think of their actions, came into being decades after the Israeli occupation of Gaza began in response to that occupation. As far as Secretary David Cameron, learn your damn brief and learn international law. Learn a bit of history as well whilst you're at it, not just what passes for it in this country, diluted as it is, especially where it relates to occupied people being able to resist. Hezbollah in Lebanon you can regard in the same light as Hamas, coming about after Israeli attacks on that nation. Or are they not allowed to defend themselves? Are Lebanon not allowed to defend themselves? Is it only Israel that has a right to defend itself? But all linked back to the Tehran regime, back to Iran, the scapegoat. We need to take the heat off Israel despite what they're doing, and Iran, well, they're it. If there are legitimate issues with Iran, then address them. But using them as a reason to demonise Houthis in Yemen for being on the side of Palestine, knowing they will stop immediately if Israel stops attacking Gaza, just shows us no Western diplomatic or political will to make Israel stop. Who can blame the Houthis, Iran-backed or not, from continuing in which case? They aren't letting Israel off. nor should any of us be taken in by this lame, don't look here, look at them over there. Aren't they awful? Divide and rule tactic. The Houthis certainly aren't. They are not only ignoring what is being said about them, but they are openly mocking those saying it, as this video here will explain. You should probably watch it next, in which case, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.